Jake Morrison stood at attention outside the conference room, his eyes scanning every corner. He had been a security officer for 3 years now, but this assignment was different. Today he was protecting Princess Lyra of the Cathari Empire. The princess was nothing like Jake had expected. She was young, maybe 19 in human years, with skin that seemed to shimmer like crystal in the light. Her eyes were large and purple, and when she looked at him, Jake felt like she could see right through him. "You don't need to be so tense," Lyra said softly as she walked past him into the corridor. "I won't bite." Jake allowed himself a small smile. "Just doing my job, Princess." "Lyra," she corrected. "Please just call me Lyra." They walked together through the Starbound, the human diplomatic vessel that was hosting the peace talks. Jake had served in the Marines before this job. He had seen combat, lost friends, and learned that the galaxy was a dangerous place. But somehow, talking to this alien princess felt more nerve-wracking than any battle. "Your ship is so different from ours," Lyra observed, touching the metal wall with her delicate fingers. "Everything is so hard, so cold." "It's practical," Jake said. "Gets the job done," Lyra smiled. "You humans are fascinating, always focused on what works, never on what feels right." Before Jake could respond, Captain Lisa Grant's voice came through his earpiece. "Morrison, we have a situation. Get the princess to the safe room immediately." Jake's training kicked in instantly. He grabbed Lyra's arm gently but firmly. "We need to move now." "What's happening?" Lyra's eyes widened with fear. "I don't know yet, but we can't take chances." They ran through the corridors as alarms began to blare. Red lights flashed overhead. Jake could hear explosions in the distance getting closer. His heart pounded, but his mind stayed clear. Get the princess to safety. That was all that mattered. They turned a corner and Jake stopped dead. The corridor ahead was blocked by twisted metal and flames. An explosion had torn through the ship's hull. "This way," Jake said, pulling Lyra in the opposite direction. They ran toward the emergency escape pod section. Jake's earpiece crackled with panicked voices. The ship's reactor had been sabotaged. They had minutes, maybe seconds, before a catastrophic explosion. When they reached the escape pod bay, Jake's blood ran cold. Most of the pods were already gone, launched by other crew members. Only one remained. "Get in," Jake ordered, opening the pod's hatch. Lyra looked at the small pod, then at Jake. Her face went pale. "It only fits one person." "I know." "Get in." "No." Lyra's voice was firm despite her fear. "We can both fit if we squeeze together." Jake looked at the pod. She was wrong. He was a big man, over 6 feet tall and built like the Marine he used to be. There was no way they would both fit. "Princess, please." "Lyra!" she shouted. "My name is Lyra." The ship shook violently. Somewhere below them, something exploded. They had seconds left. "Listen to me," Jake said, putting his hands on her shoulders. "Your mother needs you. Your people need you. This peace treaty needs you. I'm just a security guard. You're a person." Lyra's eyes filled with tears. "You have a life, people who love you. And they'll understand," Jake said gently. He had never been more sure of anything in his life. "This is what I signed up for. To protect people. To make a difference." Lyra's bottom lip trembled. Jake felt something strange in his mind, like a soft whisper. Her telepathic abilities, he realized. She was trying to convince him, trying to make him get in the pod. "It won't work," Jake said softly. "I've made up my mind." Before Lyra could protest again, Jake picked her up. She was lighter than he expected. He placed her in the escape pod despite her struggles and screams. "No, Jake, please. We can find another way." "There is no other way," Jake said. He reached for the hatch controls. "Tell your mother I'm sorry I couldn't do more." "Jake." Lyra reached for him, her crystal-like fingers grasping at his uniform. "Please don't do this." Jake looked at her one last time. She was crying now, her purple eyes bright with tears. He wanted to tell her it would be okay, that she would forget about him eventually, that she would live a long and happy life. But there was no time. "Live well, Princess," he said, and hit the launch button. The hatch sealed shut. Lyra's scream was cut off as the pod's engines fired. Through the small window, Jake could see her face twisted in grief and horror. Then the pod shot away from the ship, disappearing into the black of space. Jake stood alone in the bay. The ship groaned and shuddered around him. Fire was spreading through the corridors. The heat was already intense. He had maybe 10 seconds left. He thought about his brother Kai back on Earth. He thought about his parents, who had always been proud of him for joining the service. He thought about his friends, the ones who had died in combat. and the ones who had made it home. He hoped they would understand. He hoped they would think he did the right thing. The explosion started in the reactor core, a massive release of energy that tore through the ship's lower decks. It spread upward in a wave of destruction, consuming everything in its path. In those final moments, Jake Morrison felt something strange. A presence in his mind, warm and bright. It was Lyra, her telepathic abilities still connected to him across the distance. He could feel her grief, her horror, her desperate wish that things had been different. Jake sent back the only thought he could manage. A simple hope, a final wish that his death would mean something, that it would help bring peace between humans and the Cathari, that maybe somehow it would make the galaxy a little bit better. Then the explosion reached the escape pod bay, and Jake Morrison knew no more. Far away, safe in her escape pod, Princess Lyra screamed. She felt the exact moment Jake died, felt his consciousness wink out like a candle in the wind, the telepathic connection severed, leaving a cold, empty space in her mind where his presence had been. She curled up in the small pod, sobbing uncontrollably. Jake Morrison had given his life for hers. A human, someone she had just met, had sacrificed everything so she could live. Lyra knew in that moment that she would never forget him, never forget what he had done, and she swore to herself that his death would not be in vain. Somehow, some way, she would make sure the galaxy remembered Jake Morrison. The escape pod drifted through space, carrying the princess toward the Cathari rescue ships that were already on their way. Behind her, the Starbound exploded in a brilliant flash of light, taking Jake's body with it into the void. Queen Sarath stood on the landing platform of the Crystal Palace, watching the rescue ship descend from the sky. Her hearts were racing, both of them, beating fast in her chest in a way they hadn't in years. Her daughter was alive. That was all that mattered. The ship landed with a soft hum. The doors opened and medical staff rushed forward with a floating stretcher. Sarath ran toward them, her long robes flowing behind her. "Lyra!" she called out. Her daughter was lying on the stretcher staring at nothing. Her eyes were open but empty, like she was looking at something far away. She didn't respond to her mother's voice. "Didn't even blink. What's wrong with her?" Sarath demanded, grabbing the arm of the head medic. "She's in shock, Your Majesty," the medic said quietly. "The trauma? It was severe." They rushed Lyra inside the palace. Sarath stayed by her side every moment, holding her daughter's hand. The hand was cold, trembling slightly. Lyra's lips moved soundlessly, as if she was trying to speak but couldn't find the words. That night, Sarath sat beside her daughter's bed. The room was dark except for the soft glow of healing crystals placed around the bed. She reached out with her mind, using the telepathic bond all Cathari mothers shared with their children. What she found made her gasp. Lyra's mind was a storm of grief and horror. Memories played over and over like a broken recording. A human man with kind eyes, his hands on her shoulders, the escape pod closing, the feeling of his death, so sudden and final it had torn something inside her daughter's mind. Sarath experienced it all through Lyra's memories. She saw Jake Morrison's face, felt his determination, his certainty that this was the right thing to do. Felt his last thought, that simple hope for peace before his life ended. Tears fell from Sarath's eyes. She had never met this human, but through her daughter's memories she knew him, knew his courage, knew his sacrifice. "I won't let this be for nothing," Sarath whispered to her sleeping daughter. "I promise you." The next morning, Sarath called an emergency council meeting. Her advisors gathered in the throne room, their crystalline faces concerned. "We need to retrieve the human's remains," Sarath announced. The council murmured in surprise. High Healer Vorn stepped forward. He was old, his crystal skin clouded with age, but his mind was still sharp. "Your Majesty," Vorn said carefully, "the ship was destroyed. The debris field is scattered across thousands of kilometers. Finding one body would be nearly impossible." "Nearly impossible is not impossible," Sarath said firmly. "This human died saving my daughter. He deserves to be returned to his people with honor." "Of course, Your Majesty," Vorn bowed. "But, may I speak with you privately?" Sarath dismissed the council and led Vorn to her private chambers. The old healer looked nervous, which was unusual for him. "What is it?" Sarath asked. "There may be another option," Vorn said slowly. "But it's complicated." "Speak plainly." Vorn took a deep breath. "We could bring him back." Sarath stared at him. What do you mean? Soul threading, Vorn explained. The ancient technique. We can retrieve a consciousness from its quantum signature and rebuild the body. We've done it before with our own people. But never with a human, Sarath said. No, Vorn admitted. Never with a human. We don't know if it would work. The process requires the body to be recovered quickly within days before the quantum signature fades. And even if we succeed, there's no guarantee he would be the same. Sarath walked to the window, looking out at the crystal spires of her city. She thought about Lyra lying in bed, trapped in her own mind. She thought about Jake Morrison, who had given everything for a stranger. Do it, she said. Your Majesty, the risks. I said do it. Sarath turned to face him. This human gave his life for my daughter. For peace between our peoples. If there's even a chance we can return that life to him, we must try. Vorn bowed deeply. As you command. The next day, Ambassador Claire Foster arrived at the Crystal Palace. She was a tall woman with gray hair and sharp eyes. She bowed respectfully to Sarath. Your Majesty, first let me say how relieved we are that Princess Lyra survived, Claire said. The attack was a tragedy. Thank you, Ambassador, Sarath replied. I asked you here because I have a unusual request. She explained about soul threading, about her plan to retrieve Jake Morrison's body and attempt to bring him back to life. Claire's face went through several emotions, from surprise to concern to something that looked like fear. Your Majesty, Claire said carefully, I appreciate the gesture, but our people don't believe such a thing is possible. Many would see this as disturbing, unnatural. He saved my daughter, Sarath said simply. I understand, but do you? Sarath's voice was sharp. Do you understand what it means to feel your child's mind breaking? To know that someone died for her and she has to carry that weight forever? This human deserves every chance we can give him. Claire was quiet for a moment. I need to contact my superiors. The debate on Earth was intense. Some humans were excited about the possibility of resurrection technology. Others were horrified, calling it a violation of natural law. Religious leaders argued about the soul and whether it could truly be brought back. But Captain Lisa Grant, who had commanded the Starbound, spoke at the hearing. She told them about Jake Morrison, about his service record, about the kind of man he was. He deserves a chance, Lisa said, her voice breaking slightly. If there's any possibility he can live again, don't we owe it to him to try? The decision was made. Earth would allow the attempt, but observers would be present to document everything. The recovery mission launched immediately. Kalari ships equipped with advanced sensors spread through the debris field. They searched for days, scanning every piece of wreckage. On the third day, they found him. Jake Morrison's body was badly damaged. The explosion had burned away much of his flesh, and exposure to space had frozen what remained. But the Cathari technology didn't need a perfect body. They needed DNA, brain tissue, enough of the original pattern to work with. They had just enough. The body was rushed back to the Crystal Palace in a special containment field. Dr. Nathan Cole, a human medical examiner, nearly fainted when he saw it. This is impossible, Nathan whispered. No one could bring life back to this. Watch and learn, Vorn said grimly. They placed Jake's remains in the resurrection chamber, a room deep in the palace that most Cathari never saw. It was ancient, built by their ancestors thousands of years ago. The walls were covered in crystals that pulsed with soft light. Sarath watched from an observation room. Lyra was beside her, finally awake but still not speaking. The princess stared at Jake's body with wide, haunted eyes. We're beginning the process, Vorn announced. The crystals began to glow brighter. Energy flowed through the chamber, invisible to human eyes but blazing to Cathari senses. Vorn and his team worked with intense concentration. Their minds linked together in a telepathic network. They reached out into the quantum field, searching for the signature of Jake Morrison's consciousness. It was faint, fading, but it was there, like an echo of a voice, a ghost of what he had been. We have him, Vorn said, and Sarath heard the strain in his voice, but barely. His pattern is fragmenting. We need to work fast, the process began. Jake's body started to change, to heal. New tissue grew, replacing what had been destroyed. Bones knitted together. Organs reformed, but something was wrong. Alarms blared in the chamber. Jake's body convulsed on the platform. He's rejecting the process, one of the healers shouted. His neural pathways are incompatible. Stabilize him, Vorn commanded. They worked frantically, adjusting the energy flows, trying to adapt the ancient Cathari technique to human biology. Hours passed. Vorn's face was drawn with exhaustion. Finally, the alarms quieted. Jake's body lay still on the platform, breathing but unconscious. "Status?" Sarath demanded. Vorn looked at her with tired eyes. "He's alive. But his consciousness is trapped between life and death. We've rebuilt his body, but his mind won't come back." Lyra made a sound, a small whimper of despair. It was the first sound she had made in days. Sarath put her arm around her daughter. "Then we find a way to bring him back," she said. "Whatever it takes." Jake Morrison was dying again. He felt the explosion, felt the heat consuming him, felt his body burning away, then darkness, then the explosion again. The same moment repeating endlessly. He couldn't remember anything before the explosion. Couldn't remember anything after. There was only this moment, this death happening over and over. Sometimes he thought he heard voices, far away like echoes in a cave. But when he tried to listen, the explosion came again and swept everything away. In the resurrection chamber, High Healer Vorn studied the monitors with growing concern. Jake's body was stable, breathing on its own, heart beating steadily. But the readings of his brain activity were chaotic, scattered like 1,000 thoughts happening at once with no order or pattern. "His consciousness is trapped in a loop," Vorn explained to Queen Sarath. "He's experiencing his death repeatedly. Without intervention, he'll stay like this forever." "What kind of intervention?" Sarath asked. Vorn hesitated. "Someone needs to go in after him. Establish a telepathic link, enter his mind and guide him out. But it's extremely dangerous. His consciousness is fragmented and violent. Anyone who enters could become trapped as well, or worse, their mind could shatter from the trauma." Before Vorn could say more, Princess Lyra stepped forward. She had been standing silently in the corner, but now her eyes were clear and determined. "I'll do it," Lyra said. "Absolutely not," Sarath said immediately. "He's in there because of me." Lyra's voice was steady despite the tears on her face. "He died saving me. I won't leave him trapped in darkness." "Lyra, you don't understand the risks." "I felt him die, Mother," Lyra said quietly. "I felt his last thoughts, his hope for peace, his acceptance of death. If he's trapped in that moment, reliving it endlessly, I have to help him. I'm the only one who shares that connection with him." Vorn nodded slowly. "She's right, Your Majesty. She was telepathically connected to him when he died. That bond might be the key to reaching him." Sarath looked at her daughter, seeing the determination in her eyes. Finally, she nodded. "But I'll be monitoring every moment," Sarath said. "At the first sign of danger, we're pulling you out." They prepared Lyra for the telepathic bridge. She sat beside Jake's unconscious form, her hand resting on his. Healers placed crystals around them both, amplifying their telepathic abilities. "Remember," Vorn instructed, "his mind will not be like a normal person's. It will be chaos. Don't let yourself get pulled into his loop. Keep your sense of self strong." Lyra nodded. She closed her eyes and reached out with her mind. The world disappeared. Lyra found herself in darkness. Not the comfortable darkness of a room at night, but the absolute darkness of the void. Empty, cold, endless. "Jake?" she called out. Her voice echoed strangely like she was in a vast empty space. No answer. She pushed forward, though there was no sense of direction. She reached out with her telepathic senses, searching for any sign of Jake's consciousness. Then she felt it, a spike of pain, terror, heat, the explosion. Lyra moved toward it. The darkness gave way to light, but it was the wrong kind of light. Fire, destruction. She found herself standing on the Starbound, in the escape pod bay, watching the moment of Jake's death. Jake stood in front of the pod, watching it launch away with her inside. His face was calm, accepting. Then the explosion hit and he was consumed by flames. The scene reset. Jake stood in front of the pod again. The explosion came again. "Jake!" Lyra shouted, but he couldn't hear her. She realized she wasn't really there. This was a memory, playing on repeat. She needed to go deeper, to find the real Jake beneath the loop. Lyra closed her eyes and dove into the memory. She felt herself falling through layers of consciousness, through Jake's mind, searching for the core of who he was. She fell through memories. Jake as a child, playing with his younger brother. Jake in Marine training, learning to be a soldier. Jake on his first security assignment, nervous but determined. Each memory was like a room she passed through, getting closer to the center. Finally, she found him. Jake was sitting in darkness, his head in his hands. He looked up when Lyra appeared and his eyes were lost and confused. "You're not real," Jake said. "Nothing here is real." "I'm dead." "You're not dead," Lyra said gently, kneeling in front of him. "Not anymore." "I felt it," Jake insisted. "I felt the explosion. Felt myself die. This is just... I don't know what this is. Afterlife? Hell? A dream? It's your mind, Jake. You're trapped in the moment of your death. But your body is alive. We brought you back." Jake stared at her. "That's impossible. My people have technology you don't understand. We retrieved your body, rebuilt it, and pulled your consciousness back from the quantum field. But you're stuck here, reliving your death because you can't accept that you're alive." "I can't be alive," Jake said, shaking his head. "I died. I remember dying. You can't come back from that." "You can," Lyra said, taking his hands in hers. "But you have to choose to. You have to let go of that moment and come back to us." "Why?" Jake asked, and his voice was broken. "I did what I was supposed to do. I saved you. It's done." "Because your life has value," Lyra said firmly. "Because you deserve to live." "Because I'm asking you to." Jake looked at her for a long moment. "I don't know if I can." "Then I'll help you," Lyra said. She closed her eyes and opened her memories to him. She showed him everything that had happened after his death. Her grief, her mother's determination, the recovery mission, the resurrection process. She showed him how many people had worked to bring him back, how much effort had gone into giving him another chance. "All of this?" "For me," Jake whispered. "For you," Lyra confirmed. "Because you mattered. Because you still matter." Jake's eyes filled with tears. "I'm scared." "I know," Lyra said. "But you don't have to be scared alone. I'll be with you. We'll face whatever comes next together." In the resurrection chamber, alarms suddenly blared. Jake's body began to convulse. Healers rushed forward. His consciousness is destabilizing. A healer shouted, "The princess is in danger!" "Pull her out," Sirath commanded. "We can't," Vorn said, his face pale. "They're too deeply linked. If we sever the connection now, we could kill them both." In the dark space of Jake's mind, the world was shaking apart. The memories around them were fragmenting, dissolving into chaos. "What's happening?" Jake asked, looking around in panic. "Your consciousness is trying to reject the resurrection," Lyra explained, though she felt her own fear rising. "It wants to return to death because that feels safer than facing life again." "I don't want to die," Jake said, and he sounded surprised by his own words. "I thought I did, but I don't." "Then fight," Lyra urged. "Fight to live. I'll help you, but you have to want it." Jake stood up. The darkness around them was pressing in, trying to swallow them both. But Jake reached out and took Lyra's hand. "I want to live," he said, and his voice was stronger now. "I want another chance." Light exploded around them. Not the terrible light of the explosion, but a warm, gentle light. The darkness began to retreat. But it wasn't enough. The fragments of Jake's consciousness were still scattered, still trying to pull back into the loop of death. Lyra made a decision. She reached deep into herself, into her own life force, and pushed it through their telepathic connection. She gave Jake a part of herself, her own energy, her own vitality. "Lyra, no," Jake said, feeling what she was doing. "You'll hurt yourself." "It's okay," Lyra said, though she felt herself weakening. "You saved my life. Now I'm saving yours." The light grew brighter. Jake's scattered consciousness began to pull together, drawn by Lyra's life force. The memories stopped fragmenting. The darkness stopped pressing in. In the resurrection chamber, Jake's body went still. The alarms quieted. His eyes began to move beneath closed eyelids. "He's coming back," Vorn said in wonder. Jake's eyes opened. They were blue, the same color they had always been. But there was something different about them now. Something that hadn't been there before. They seemed to glow slightly, reflecting light in a way human eyes shouldn't. "Jake?" Vorn said carefully. Jake's head turned slowly. He looked at the healer with confusion. His lips moved, but no sound came out. He tried again. "Where?" Jake's voice was rough, like he hadn't used it in years. "Where am I?" "You're in the Crystal Palace," Vorn said. "You're alive, Jake Morrison. You've come back from death." Jake's eyes widened. He looked down at his hands, flexing his fingers as if he couldn't believe they were real. Then his eyes found Lyra, who was slumped in her chair beside him, unconscious but breathing. "Is she..." Jake's voice was filled with panic. She's fine, Sarath said, stepping forward. She exhausted herself bringing you back, but she'll recover. Jake stared at the Queen, then at the healers, then at his own hands again. His breathing quickened, becoming panicked. I was dead, he whispered. I remember dying. I felt it. How am I alive? That, Sarath said gently, is a very long story. Jake Morrison sat by the window of his recovery room, staring out at the crystal spires of the Cathari city. 3 weeks had passed since he woke up. 3 weeks of tests, examinations, and conversations that left him feeling more confused than enlightened. He was alive. That was the simple fact. But nothing else about his situation was simple. The door opened and Princess Lyra entered, carrying a tray of food. She smiled at him, but Jake could see the worry in her purple eyes. You didn't come to breakfast again, she said, setting the tray down. Wasn't hungry, Jake replied. You need to eat, Lyra insisted. Your body is still adjusting. Jake looked at his hands. They looked normal enough, but he knew they weren't. Not really. The resurrection process had changed him in ways he was still discovering. He could hear things humans weren't supposed to hear. Yesterday, he had heard a conversation happening 3 rooms away. He could see in the dark as clearly as in daylight, and sometimes when he looked at Lyra, he could feel her emotions like they were his own. I shouldn't be here, Jake said quietly. Where should you be? Lyra asked, sitting across from him. I don't know. Dead, maybe. That's where I was supposed to be. Lyra's face fell. Don't say that. Why not? It's true. Jake stood and paced the room. I made my choice. I gave my life for you. That was supposed to be the end of it. Did you want to die? Lyra asked. No, Jake admitted. But I was okay with it. It meant something. Now I'm alive again, and I don't know what I'm supposed to do with that. I don't know what I am anymore. You're Jake Morrison, Lyra said firmly. Am I? Jake turned to face her. My body was destroyed. Your people rebuilt it from my DNA. My consciousness was scattered, and you pieced it back together. Am I really me, or am I just a copy? A collection of memories in a reconstructed body. Does it matter? Lyra asked. Yes. Jake's voice rose, and he immediately felt guilty. This wasn't Lyra's fault. I'm sorry. I don't know how to feel about any of this. There was a knock at the door. Dr. Sophie Lynn entered, a human neurologist who had been studying Jake's case. She was a small woman with kind eyes and graying hair. How are you feeling today, Jake? Sophie asked. Like a science experiment, Jake said honestly. Sophie smiled sadly. I know this is difficult, but I have some news that might help. We've completed all the tests and we understand your condition better now. What's wrong with me? Jake asked. Nothing's wrong with you, Sophie said, but you're not entirely human anymore. The resurrection process has given you some Cathari abilities, mild telepathy, enhanced senses, and an extended lifespan. Jake stared at her. What do you mean, extended lifespan? Cathari live for about 300 years, Sophie explained. We believe you'll live for at least 200, possibly more. Your cells regenerate differently now. You age more slowly. Jake sat down heavily. So I'm going to watch everyone I know grow old and die. Eventually, yes, Sophie said gently. But that's many years away. Can I go home? Jake asked. To Earth? Sophie and Lyra exchanged a glance. Sophie looked uncomfortable. You can visit, Sophie said carefully, but you can't stay permanently. The changes to your biology require periodic treatments. Specifically, you need to absorb certain energy frequencies that only Cathari technology can provide. Without them, your enhanced abilities will start to malfunction and cause pain. Eventually, it could kill you. Jake felt like the floor was dropping out from under him. So I'm trapped here. You're not trapped, Lyra said quickly. You're welcome here. We want you here. But I don't have a choice, Jake said bitterly. That's what trapped means. He stood and walked out of the room, ignoring their calls. He needed to be alone. Needed to think. Jake wandered through the Crystal Palace until he found himself in a garden. It was beautiful, filled with plants that glowed softly in the fading light. He sat on a bench and put his head in his hands. You're angry, a voice said. Jake looked up to see Queen Sarath standing nearby. She was tall and regal, her crystalline skin catching the light. Your Majesty, Jake said, starting to stand. Sit, Sarath said, sitting beside him. We should talk. About what? Jake asked. About why I brought you back, Sarath said. You think I did it without considering your feelings. that I forced this on you, didn't you? Jake said, unable to keep the bitterness from his voice. Yes, Sarath said simply. I did, and I'd do it again. Jake looked at her in surprise. He had expected denial or justification, not honesty. You saved my daughter, Sarath continued. You gave your life without hesitation, without expecting anything in return. That kind of courage, that kind of selflessness is rare. I looked at your broken body and thought, the galaxy needs more people like this, not fewer. But you didn't ask me, Jake said. How could I? Sarath asked. You were dead. And if I could have asked you, what would you have said? No, let me stay dead? Jake opened his mouth and closed it. He didn't know what he would have said. I understand you're struggling, Sarath said more gently. You died and came back. You're different now and you didn't choose that. But Jake Morrison, let me ask you something. If you had known that saving Lyra would trap you in this half-human, half-Cathari existence, would you still have done it? Jake thought about that moment in the escape pod bay. Lyra's frightened face. The choice between his life and hers. Yes, he said quietly. I still would have done it. Then perhaps you're not as lost as you think, Sarath said. You're still the man who made that choice. You're still Jake Morrison. She stood and walked away, leaving Jake alone with his thoughts. That night, Jake couldn't sleep. He went back to the garden and found Lyra there, sitting by a fountain. Can't sleep either? Lyra asked. Too much on my mind, Jake said, sitting beside her. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the water. I'm sorry, Lyra said finally. I should have asked if you wanted to come back. I couldn't bear the thought of you being trapped in that darkness. I know, Jake said, and I'm sorry for being angry. None of this is your fault. Are you still angry? Lyra asked. Jake considered. I don't know, maybe, but not at you. At the situation, maybe. At the universe for making me choose between two impossible options. What options? Lyra asked. Either I stay dead and honor my sacrifice, or I come back and live with being dependent on your people for survival, Jake said. Either way, I lose something. Or, Lyra said softly, you could see it differently. You were given a second chance at life. Not many people get that. And yes, you're different now. But maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe you can do things now that you couldn't before. Like what? Jake asked. You're a bridge, Lyra said, between humans and Cathari. You understand both our peoples now. You could help us understand each other better, help prevent the kind of extremism that caused the attack on the Starbound. Jake hadn't thought of it that way. You think I could make a difference? You already did, Lyra said. You saved my life. You brought our peoples closer together. Who knows what else you might do? Jake looked at his hands again. They didn't feel foreign anymore, just different. I met my brother yesterday, Jake said. They let him visit through video call. He was so happy I was alive, but I could see it in his eyes. I scared him. I look like me, but I'm not quite right. My eyes glow sometimes. I move too fast. I knew what he was feeling before he said it. Did you tell him? Lyra asked. No, Jake said. I didn't know how. How do you tell your brother you're not completely human anymore? Maybe you start by telling him you're still you, Lyra suggested. The rest is just details, Jake smiled slightly. Just details, right? You don't have to figure everything out tonight, Lyra said. You have time. More time than you did before, actually. Yeah, Jake said. 200 years. That's going to be weird. It'll be weird for me, too, Lyra said. Cathari lived for 300 years. I'll be around for most of your second life. Maybe we can figure it out together. Jake looked at her. Really looked at her. In the 3 weeks since he'd woken up, she had visited him every day. Brought him food, talked to him, sat with him when he didn't want to talk. She had given him part of her life force to bring him back. Why, Jake asked. Why do you care so much? Lyra met his eyes. Because you died for me. Because I felt your last thoughts and they were about peace and hope, not fear or regret. Because in those last moments, you cared more about me than yourself. How could I not care about you? Something shifted in Jake's chest. Not physical, but emotional. For the first time since waking up, he felt like maybe he could accept this new life. Maybe he could find purpose in it. Thank you, Jake said quietly, for bringing me back. Even if I'm mad about it sometimes, Lyra smiled. You're welcome, even if you're grumpy about it. They sat together in the garden until dawn, watching the crystal spires catch the first light of day. Jake still had questions, still had doubts, but for the first time he felt like maybe he could find answers. Maybe he could be more than just the man who died and came back. Maybe he could be someone new. 6 months passed like water through fingers. Jake Morrison stood in front of a mirror in his quarters, adjusting the collar of his formal uniform. It was neither human nor Cathari, but something in between, a symbol of what he had become. Today was important. Today he would address both the human and Cathari governments about the peace treaty. His first public appearance since his resurrection. There was a knock on his door. "Come in," Jake called. Lyra entered, wearing her royal robes. She looked worried. "Are you ready?" she asked. "No," Jake said honestly, "but I'm going anyway." Over the past 6 months, Jake had slowly accepted his new reality. He worked as an unofficial liaison between humans and Cathari, helping to smooth over cultural misunderstandings. He was good at it. His unique perspective helped both sides see issues from different angles, but not everyone was happy about his existence. There were humans who called him a monster, an abomination. They said the Cathari had no right to bring him back, that he was proof they were trying to replace humanity with altered beings. Some even called for him to be destroyed. On the Cathari side, traditionalists argued that soul threading should never have been used on an alien. They said it cheapened their sacred technology, that it was a waste of resources on someone who wasn't even Cathari. Jake had become a symbol. Some saw hope in him. Others saw everything they feared. "There's been a threat," Lyra said quietly, "against both of us. Security wants to cancel the speech." "No," Jake said firmly. "That's exactly what they want. To silence us. To prove that humans and Cathari can't work together. Jake, they're talking about assassination." "I died once already," Jake said. "I'm not going to spend my second life hiding in fear." They walked together to the great hall where the speech would take place. Security was heavy. Both human and Cathari guards lined the walls. Representatives from dozens of worlds filled the seats. Jake stepped up to the podium. Thousands of eyes watched him. He could feel their emotions, their thoughts, fear, curiosity, hope, hatred. "6 months ago I died," Jake began. His voice was steady. "I gave my life to save Princess Lyra because I believed peace between our peoples was worth dying for. Then Queen Serath brought me back and I was angry. I felt like my choice had been taken away, like I had been changed into something I never asked to be." He paused, looking out at the crowd. "But I understand now. I'm not the man I was. I'm something new, part human, part Cathari, and that scares people. I scare people. Because I'm proof that the lines we draw between species aren't as solid as we think." A murmur ran through the crowd, some approving, some angry. "There are people who want me dead," Jake continued, "who think I'm an abomination that shouldn't exist. And honestly, I understand. I'm not natural. I'm the result of technology that many find disturbing. But I'm also alive. I think, I feel. I care about the same things I always did. Peace, understanding, protecting others." He looked at Lyra, standing at the side of the stage. "Princess Lyra gave part of her life force to bring me back. Queen Serath spent enormous resources to resurrect me, not because they had to, but because they believed my life had value. All I'm asking is that you give me the chance to prove them right. Give me the chance to show that someone like me, someone caught between two worlds, can help build bridges instead of walls." Before he could continue, there was a commotion in the crowd. Jake's enhanced hearing caught it first. The click of a weapon being armed. "Get down!" Jake shouted. Everything happened at once. A figure in the crowd stood, raising a weapon. Security guards rushed forward. Lyra screamed, and Jake moved. He was faster now, his enhanced body responding before his mind fully processed the threat. He jumped from the stage, crossing the distance in seconds. His hand closed around the weapon just as it fired. The blast hit Jake in the chest. He felt the impact, the burning pain, but he didn't fall. His regenerative abilities, the same ones that made him age slowly, were already working to heal the damage. Security guards tackled the attacker. More guards surrounded Jake and Lyra, protecting them from any other threats. The hall erupted into chaos. "Jake!" Lyra ran to him, her hands on his chest where the blast had hit. His uniform was burned, but beneath it his skin was already healing. "I'm okay," Jake said, breathing hard. "It takes more than that to kill me now." The attacker was dragged away, shouting about how Jake was an insult to nature, how he should have stayed dead. Jake watched him go, feeling more sad than angry. Later, in a secure room, Queen Serath examined Jake's wound. It was already mostly healed, just a red mark on his skin. "You could have been killed," Serath said. "But I wasn't," Jake replied. "And neither was Lyra. That's what matters." The attacker confessed, Commander Ben Hayes said. He was Jake's former superior officer, now working as a security liaison. He was part of a group called the Pure Species Coalition. They have members on both the human and Cathari sides. "Let me guess," Jake said. "They want to stop the peace treaty." "They want to stop integration between species," Ben explained. "They see you as the ultimate symbol of what they're fighting against. A blending of human and Cathari. So I really am a bridge," Jake said with a bitter laugh. "I just didn't realize I'd be such a controversial one." Over the next few days, investigators uncovered more of the plot. The Pure Species Coalition had been behind the original attack on the Starbound. They had sabotaged the reactor, hoping to kill both human and Cathari diplomats and derail the peace talks. They had failed then, but Jake's resurrection had given them a new target. They planned to assassinate both Jake and Lyra at the speech, making it look like the peace treaty had led to death and destruction. But their plan had failed. Jake's survival, his willingness to protect Lyra even after everything he'd been through, had instead strengthened support for the peace treaty. People who had been uncertain now saw the genuine bond between humans and Cathari. Jake sat with Lyra in the garden where they had talked months before. "You saved me again," Lyra said softly. "I guess it's becoming a habit," Jake said. "Does it still hurt?" Lyra asked, touching his chest where the wound had been. "No," Jake said. "It healed completely. One of the perks of being part Cathari, I suppose." "Are you still angry?" Lyra asked. "About being brought back?" Jake thought about that. "No, not anymore. I understand now what your mother was trying to tell me. My life does have value. Not because of what I was, but because of what I can do now. What I can be. And what's that?" Lyra asked. "A bridge," Jake said. "Between humans and Cathari. Someone who understands both sides. Someone who can help prevent the kind of hatred that led to the attacks." "That's a lot of responsibility," Lyra said. "Yeah," Jake agreed. "But I'm not doing it alone." He looked at her. Over the past 6 months, they had become close friends. She had been with him through his anger, his confusion, his slow acceptance. She had never judged him, never pushed him to be anything other than himself. "I talked to my brother again," Jake said. "I told him everything. About the changes, about the telepathy, about living for 200 years. "How did he take it?" Lyra asked. "Better than I expected," Jake said. "He said I was still his brother no matter what. That the important parts of me hadn't changed." "He's right," Lyra said. "Maybe," Jake said. "But some things have changed. I can't go back to my old life. Can't be a regular security officer. Can't pretend I'm just human." "So what will you do?" Lyra asked. "Queen Serath offered me a position," Jake said. "Official liaison between the human and Cathari governments. I'd travel between worlds, help with diplomatic issues, work on cultural exchange programs." "That sounds perfect for you," Lyra said, smiling. "It does," Jake agreed. "But it's also scary. I'm still figuring out who I am now. What if I mess it up?" "Then you'll learn and do better," Lyra said simply. "That's what everyone does." Jake laughed. "When did you get so wise?" "When I died and came back," Lyra said, then paused. "Wait, that was you." They both laughed, the tension of the past few days finally breaking. "Thank you," Jake said seriously. "For everything. For bringing me back, even when I didn't want to come. For staying with me while I figured things out. For believing I was worth saving." "You are worth saving," Lyra said. "You're worth everything we did and more." Jake stood and looked up at the sky. Somewhere up there were human colonies, space stations, worlds he'd never seen. And here on this Cathari planet was a place he'd learned to call home. He was neither human nor Cathari. He was something new, something unique, and maybe that was okay. 3 months later, Jake Morrison stood in a conference room on Earth. On one side were human officials. On the other, Cathari representatives, including Queen Serath and Princess Lyra. They were finalizing the details of the peace treaty. Jake helped translate not just words but meanings. When humans said something one way, he explained what they really meant to the Cathari. When the Cathari expressed ideas through telepathic concepts, he found the words to make humans understand. He was a bridge, and he was good at it. After the meeting, Jake walked with Queen Sarath through a human city. People stared at her crystalline skin and elegant features, but they also waved and smiled. Progress was slow, but it was real. You were right, Jake said to Sarath. About everything. About what specifically? Sarath asked with amusement. About my life having value, Jake said. About me being able to make a difference. When I died, I thought that was the end of my story, the final chapter. But you didn't let it end. No, Sarath agreed. I didn't, and I never will apologize for that. I'm not asking you to, Jake said. I'm thanking you for giving me a second chance. For believing I was worth the effort, Sarath smiled. You saved my daughter, Jake Morrison. You gave your life without hesitation. How could I do anything less? That night, Jake stood on a balcony in his apartment looking at the stars. He thought about his old life, the man he used to be. That Jake Morrison was gone, dead in the explosion on the Starbound. But a new Jake Morrison had been born, one who could live for 200 years, one who could hear thoughts and see in the dark, one who was neither fully human nor fully Cathari, but something entirely new. He had been given a second life, and he was determined to make it count. His communicator beeped. A message from Lyra. There's a situation on Outpost 7. They need someone who understands both humans and Cathari. Are you available? Jake smiled and typed back. Always. He looked at the stars one more time, then went inside to pack. There was work to do, bridges to build, peace to maintain. Jake Morrison had died to save a princess, and a queen had refused to let him go. Now he understood why. Because some lives were worth fighting for. Some sacrifices deserved to be honored not by accepting them, but by refusing to let them be final. He had given his life for peace. Now he would spend his second life building it. And that, Jake thought as he prepared for his next mission, was worth living for.